right, Dana, take it away.
Okay, well, yes, so I'm glad to see a group here tonight. And we've all read and memorized the Tao that Robert wrote. I found it very interesting, and I was lucky enough that Doug had done an ES study and had used a translation, had gotten a book that does, you know, I guess there's many translations done of the Tao Te Ching, but this particular one, for some reason, I guess they used in an ES study when he was back in Massachusetts. And I picked it up and really, really found it very interesting. So yes, it's by Henry W.E.I. Way. So anyway, what I'd like to do here, obviously, is we're going to put up, I'm going to share on the screen. What I did was I put Robert's study, but I did it, I transposed it into a Word document. It's the same exact one, but I interposed in there specific chapters from the Tao Te Ching. And I just picked out some representative ones that I thought were, would have some meaning to some of what he wrote and just in general about, you know, what Lao-tzu and possibly others were trying to say about the Tao and what it is and what it means and different aspects of it. So I guess I'll start with sharing the screen. Okay. So Michelle, I don't have everyone. So that's typical, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if anybody has anything to say, or it's going to be difficult, I don't want you to, you know, wait for me to call on you because I don't have everyone on the screen. So please, you know, just give your input, as well as I have highlights for certain paragraphs in here, not for others. These are just some of the ones I selected. Please, if there's anything you want to go over, you know, call it out and say you want to discuss it.
Can you make it bigger?
Can I?
You have to make it bigger on your desktop.
Yeah, go down in the bottom right corner.
Okay. Oh, I see. It's getting pretty big. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay. So all I want to say about Lao-tzu, because I really want to get into the study of this, I hope, is that as this book by Henry Way said, he was a custodian of the Imperial Archives of the Chow House. And he did that for many, many years. As a matter of fact, not until he was 80 years old did he leave there. It was said that he followed a singular path. And he loved the contemplative life. So we have an insight that he probably did meditation, yoga, such like that. He would be, and it's referred to much in the Tao, is he it would be considered a sage. And he devoted his life and his mind to inner culture and pursuit of truth. Some of that might sound a little familiar to us as theosophists. But he did become, supposedly he became weary of the grasping and the hypocrisy of the world. This is from Robert's writing, and left the court. And he was asked to write a short book before he disappeared. And that's what we get with the Tao Te Ching. Tao Te Ching, Tao Te Ching, Tao Te Ching, sorry. And so what we're going to do is focus on that book. If you have any discussions about him you'd like to bring up. I will say that he was actually Confucius. He was ahead of Confucius, I believe, by about, I don't know, they said something about 50 years or something. And there seems like there was some contention between the two religions, or what, I don't even know what we would call Confucianism. But they seem to have been kind of opposite each other. And they did encounter each other and met at times. And you can imagine the two of them having a discussion on their philosophies. So so we're starting out with, obviously, the first thing is, what is Tao? And right off, we kind of get a mysterious, nebulous, ethereal idea that it's difficult to describe. And so with that said, and what I'd like to do is we'll read the information in yellow, we can discuss it, and then we'll read the writing in red, which is a chapter. They call them chapters, I could call them verses. And those are directly from his writings. So let me start out, I just want to read the first one. No word adequately conveys what the Tao is. It can be rendered the way, existence, nature, the great track, evolution, even God, all terms which hint at something of its essence, but need to be supplemented by the others, plus a lot of experience to say it all. The Tao is all that is, together with the realization experience that this all is not just lying there, but is continually in process, changing and evolving, like an ever flowing and ever widening river, never the same from one moment to the next. And I would ask anyone if anyone has any other descriptive thoughts on what Tao might be. Only because I guess I was also reading that there were other ways it can be described of what Tao is, this mysterious Tao, what it might mean to you, which you know, what it might, you might internalize it as.
Sometimes it's been described as the absolute or the natural order of things.
Yes, I was reading, you know, absolute, that's, yeah, divine power, divine, someone and I think it was in the translation, something about union with the divine. Okay. Would someone be able to read the first, this is chapter 1. I still want to call them verses, but this is the very first chapter he writes in the Tao Te Ching. And so they always say that's, is kind of established the whole concept and introduction of Tao. So if someone's willing to maybe to read that.
Jerry.
I'll do it.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me
Yes.
okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So just read the first verse on the screen.
Yes.
Okay. The Tao that can be stated is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is originator of heaven and earth. The nameable is mother of the 10,000 things. Therefore, always be desireless, so as to discern Tao's wonderful essence. Always have some desire, so as to discern its manifestations. These two come out from the same source, but are different in name. Their identical nature is a mystery. Mystery of mysteries, that is the gate of all wonderful essence. You know, it might be fun. You want to hear another translation?
Okay.
And they're not entirely different, but there's nuances between them. This
Yes.
is another translation. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the source of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of the 10,000 things. Desireless, one may behold the mystery. Desiring, one may see the manifestations. Though one in origin, they emerge with distinct names. Both are mysteries, depth within depth, the threshold of all secrets.
Wow. And whose translation is that?
You know, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm uncertain.
It's interesting, and maybe young Pablo his memory is probably better than mine, but I thought that also in the Cloud of Unknowing, didn't they talk about the 10,000 creatures when they were trying to refer to, the material forms?
I don't remember that particular information in the Cloud of Unknowing, but it may be there. I know that in Chinese philosophy, they use the 10,000 things to talk about like manifestation.
Right.
But yeah, it would be interesting if they use the same number in the Cloud of Unknowing.
Yeah, that I just found it unusual.
Yeah.
Well, this passage is definitely, setting down some fundamental metaphysics for the system. And as Elena was alluding to, it's definitely pointing in the direction of, if not identical with what we in Theosophy would call the absolute. So
Yeah.
I'm sure there's nuances of differences between the ideas, but you could say that it's drawing a demarcation between the unmanifest and the manifest. And also, as we all know from having enjoyed the Tao over the years, pinning things down, concretizing things, being kind of rigid in your interpretation of things doesn't work well with the Tao.
No.
He's not very encouraging of that activity.
He absolutely. And didn't they say that he actually appealed this type of religion, whatever, was very popular with the artists, poets, people who didn't hold, weren't as solid on the ground as far as, being very rigid or more rigid. And because it was you used your imagination a lot.
Uh-huh.
and such. So I think that's a good point.
There was a seminar up in Santa Barbara at the Institute of World Culture years ago where they were talking about Chinese art and comparing it with Western art. If you think of like paintings, European painters tend to fill the canvas, and there's a lot of things happening. In every corner and every little inch of the painting, there's something that's been painted. But in a lot of Chinese art, and I'm not an expert in this, so I'm just kind of speaking in huge generalities, but there's a certain willingness to include empty space, and there's a strong philosophical yearning not to fill the canvas, but to leave room for the imagination, to leave room for the viewer, the perceiver, to bring something into the painting themselves. And apparently that has something to do, this person was saying at the seminar, with the influence of the Tao, where that, you know, that empty space
Yes.
is not a void, it's a fullness. It has
Yes.
potential. There's all this potential. Like and later on in the Tao, it talks about what makes the room valuable isn't the walls, but the empty space inside the walls.
Right, right. And another analogy was a wheel. So the spokes of the wheel, but the
Yeah.
you know, the frame of the wheel in the space in between was
Which makes it valuable.
right, which makes it valuable. Yes.
There is something at the end of the first yellow paragraph, which it sounds very interesting, that the Tao is all that is, but also is like they mention like it's a river, winding river, never the same, always changing. The river, the way is the same, but not the content. The water is changing continuously, and there is something which Heraclitus said before. It's like no man can go twice in the same water, because even the river is not the same water, and the man is not even
right.
the same. So the Tao is continually changing, like ourselves and everything in the world. This is what making me thinking on Heraclitus, with that very famous phrase, no man can go twice in the same water.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And water is very important, very symbolic. It seems in Tao, water, it appears weak, it's, you know, fluid and such, but its power is so understated. And I think I believe in some of the chapters even talks about that a little bit, but I don't think I have any of those in this. So that's
I can help you.
That's a good phrase. Oh, okay, yeah.
Verse 8. The highest good is like water. Water nourishes the 10,000 things without striving with them. It settles in places avoided by all, and therefore is close to the Tao. In dwelling, cherish the ground. In meditation, go deep in the heart. In dealing with others, be genial and kind. In speech, be true. In ruling, preserve order. In business, show facility. In action, be timely. Where there is no contention, there is no reproach.
Yep, it's a good one.
So you have to watch my convention talk.
Okay.
What is it? What's the title?
I'm
on the
No,
symbolism
because
of water, no
the
doubt.
end of it, I used water as a symbol,
okay.
and I took it from the Tao Te Ching.
Oh, All right, yeah, it's amazing what his sayings lead to and what meanings they have to us, I think. Okay, so maybe we'll just go on to the next. This is an important point when he starts talking about words and how they really can't describe the Tao, and yet all we have are words. Well, it's let me read this, and I'll do is I don't have a problem reading the content and ask if people will read the chapters. Words can get in the way of the fullness of this realization. Even the greatest words like God or Tao may point to the infinite object, but also come out of the finite experience of the one using them. It helps to realize that the vast universe, including the sun and planets, and the old earth itself were there long before any names, at least in our human language, were there to label them, and managed very well to be what they are without such labels. Words, the text says, came out of the womb of matter, or more literally, being named the Tao is the mother of the 10,000 things. And that's said a lot in the chapters. In other words, because we live in the world of matter and multiplicity, we create words to distinguish one of the 10,000 things from another, but they were not named or seen so separate one from another in the beginning. So I think that's that really captures a lot of, I believe, what Lao-tzu was trying to, you know, help people understand. These words are just they get in the way, and they become I think a point of separateness, or that's kind of what I said. The minute you start using words and refer to things with words, you start separating things, and not necessarily in a good way. It can, you know, it can just accelerate from there. People start developing conflicts, and so I don't know what other people, you know, understand from this paragraph or from there.
Also, I think one problem with the words in connection to the Tao is that the Tao likes to present things in terms of movement and process, not in terms of fixed things. So when we label something, immediately we have the idea of something that is fixed, and then you lose the idea of something that is fluid and a process. So I think it's the whole approach of the Tao is trying to get to the formless, to the nameless, to go beyond the mind that labels, and just being immersed, flowing along with reality.
Right. Okay. And he refers a lot to nature. You know, nature doesn't have labels and words, and it flows, and to be part of that.
I have a verse to support what Pablo was just saying. It would be verse 14. It says, look, you cannot see it. It is formless. Listen, you cannot hear it. It is soundless. Grasp, you cannot touch it. It is non-being. These three are indiscernible, and therefore are merged into the one. The upper part is not dazzling. The lower part is not dark. It is nameless and in ceaseless motion, and returns to the void. Form of the formless, image of the imageless, it is indistinct and indefinable. Confront it, and you will not see its face. Follow it, and you will not find its back. Hold fast to the Ori Tao, thus gaining mastery over the moment, knowing the beginning of time as the thread of Tao.
it's very elusive, you know, and that's seems to be important, that it be.
Well, if you think about the fact that we human beings at this stage of evolution are over-focused on the manifest, over-focused on the physical, over-focused on the senses. We're basically our consciousness is captured by the activity of the five senses, right? And the spiritual journey has a lot to do with retracting back into the source of our being, which requires us to put aside, you know, at least temporarily from time to time, our overabsorption in the world. And the Tao Te Ching is all about looking for the source of things, looking for what's behind things, looking for the invisible forces behind what's apparent.
Yeah.
And that requires a certain, you know, development of one's internal faculties.
Yes. Again, getting back to, and we'll see it a little bit later, meditation. And very important to Taoism that practicing, but even though he may not say it exactly, you know, the way we understand it or talk about it.
Blavatsky, in the Secret Doctrine, first volume, in the beginning, in the introduction, she talked a little bit about the translation of the Tao Te Ching. And she pointed out that one translator, in order to get his translation, used 60 translators. And then she added, maybe we don't have any original idea or expression of Lao-tzu, because so many translations. Jerry, what Jerry read is completely in my translation, not very completely, but this is the book. Let's see, I don't know if you can see this. Well, this is the translation Susan recommended the other day, which is Jafu, Fan, and Jane English. And in this particular translation, there is a very beautiful introduction by Jacob Neilman. So that we cannot pretend what we read in the Tao Te Ching is completely the philosophical, mystical, or metaphysical ideas of Laozi.
Yeah, that's
Laozi.
Yep, that's true. That's true.
So we don't expect, and I know in reading translation from Spanish to English is changed very, very much, not completely, but because imagine Chinese is not very easy to translate.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
So
point.
we have chapter 42. And if someone wants to just read that.
I can read it if you want. Chapter 42, Tao and Transformation, Tao Hua. Tao gave birth to one. One gave birth to two. Two gave birth to three. Three gave birth to the 10,000 things. The 10,000 things carry yin and embrace yang. The two primordial breaths blend and produce harmony. To be orphaned or lonely or unworthy is what all people detest. Yet kings and nobles apply those terms to themselves. Indeed, things sometimes benefit by an intended injury. sometimes receive injury from an intended benefit. What others teach, I shall also teach. The strong and violent will die an unnatural death. This will serve as my chief lesson.
And it starts out with the very basic concept. Tao gave birth to one, and that gave birth to two, two gave birth to three, and then became the 10,000 things. And that's when World of Complications started, and or I see that. The one as the absolute, two, you know, and then three, and then it just multiplies from there. And, you know, it just seems like it can, you know, we talked about it in words, you know, but there's so many concepts and ways you could think of how that occurs. When you have, when you have yin and yang, you have harmony, and then it begins to be added on to and complicated, and things, you know, I don't know. That's some of what I took from that.
Yeah, you could say that it's kind of a cosmogenesis. This is the first book of the Secret Doctrine, condensed. Tao gives birth to one. One gives birth to two, spirit and matter. Two gives birth to three. And from these elements, all of manifestation can be accounted for.
I mean, is it referring to almost the Trinity? And then, you know, then it becomes the 10,000 things. And so, yeah, that type of, you know, kind of, and I thought there was a reference that some of this does go back to the teachings of the ancient wisdom.
I think HPB would say that the Tao Te Ching, like other sacred texts, are basically a restatement to a different audience in a different language of the same Gupta Vidya, the same secret doctrine, the same eternal philosophy, just stated in different words to a different audience in a different way. But the ideas would be behind it are identical. I think that's what she would say.
Okay.
Presented in a way that, you know, the people of concern could understand and needed at that time in the revolution.
The way to know the Tao, in other words, is not to argue about words or philosophy, much less to claim that something deep within us is more real than the world of infinite nature we see around us. I didn't finish, but to recover the sense of wonder we may have had as a child, and just truly to see the awesomeness of existence itself.
I think this is something of the draw of the secret doctrine's cosmogenesis as well. You know, when we read these passages and also immerse ourselves in the stanzas of Zhan, for example, what we have is a sense of wonder. The mind can't respond to all of that, at least not at the beginning. And even getting involved too much in the comparisons and all the rest of it becomes a drag on one's imagination and the sense of wonder. So I think, as has been suggested here by Robert, avoid making too many comparisons, but really balance that with just experiencing life as it comes to us. And I think that's really also what HPV was trying to convey. Here are some things that are amazing and wonderful, and but try to relax with them and sense into the essence of the teaching, because it will be borne out in your everyday life.
Right. And again, words, don't bother with the words. You know, it's not a experience of words. And though I wonder though sometimes, you know, words I understand, but then there's got to be some component of ideas. You know, I always think there have to be ideas, imagination, obviously, but you still have to work in the concept of ideas, I think. Of course, then words are used. So, yeah.
But maybe the problem isn't words per se, as it is the way that the lower mind tends to want to concretize them and concretize their meaning. Because, you know, language is very sacred and words are very sacred. And, you know, in the Vedas, they talk a lot about, you know, the gift of language is a gift of the gods. So the problem with language is what we've done with it. You know, we fight wars over it, for heaven's sakes. And I think your point, Dana, is really, really good. What's more important is the ideas that stand behind the words. Because within, if you look at it that way, which I think is really wise that you say that, then basically all of us have a lifetime, maybe thousands of lifetimes worth of exploration of the deepest inner meanings of all these words and ideas. And, you know, the deeper we go with these ideas, the more we see that they're interconnected and come from a common source, and draw a richness about them that they don't have when we just use them in thoughtless and flippant ways.
Right. Yes. Thank you. So Robert writes, when people lost sight of the way to live, came codes of love and honesty. Learning came, charity came, hypocrisy took charge. I think that's one of the words I wanted to think of before. When differences weakened family ties, came benevolent fathers and dutiful sons. And when lands were disrupted and misgoverned, came ministers commended as loyal. We know, we see this all the time in governments and establishments. What for the Confucianists was the very soul of true civilization, for the Taoist was decay and hypocrisy. To them, true virtue, like that of nature or a child with eyes full of wonder, could never be forced by bookish ethics. The Taoist thought that by getting rid of formalized learning and imposed duty, people would be 100-fold happier and would do the right thing naturally and spontaneously, that they only resist because they are told to do it. It's pretty ideal in some ways. I can vision this, but it's kind of, it looks, you know, like that we disband all these civilizations that we've become and just sort out into small, happy little clans who function in nature and don't have all the conflicts and don't develop all the, but I wonder, even a group of 3 that doesn't necessarily mean you won't develop conflict, and you won't have hypocrisy, and you won't.
I think what Robert's trying to say here in this paragraph is that where the ideal of Confucian civilization is based on ethics and following rules and a hierarchy, for the Taoist, that's decay and hypocrisy. That's what the little excerpt you read right before, that for the Taoist, if we can live in harmony with nature, keep a childlike, our eyes full of wonder, then we don't need the ethics and the rules in order for a society.
Yeah, I was thinking on those lines, like Plato also said, where there is love, there is no need for rules. So I think what the Tao Te Ching is saying is that if there was a spiritual perception, then there would not be need for this or this or this or this. But since there is not a spiritual perception, then you have to recourse to these things, otherwise everything is a chaos. But hopefully, we grow so that we can get rid of things, and we try to develop that sequence. Is a very interesting sequence. When this is not, then you need this. If this is not, then you need this. And you see how we fall to the bottom because we don't have the spiritual.
Right. Yes. Yes.
This is Lisa. You can't see me because I can't get my camera to work for some reason.
We can see you.
You can.
Yes,
I
we
can't.
can.
Hi, I can't see me. Well, anyway, so part of what I'm sensing, I have to kind of compare it to the theosophy here, is with this idealized version of Taoism, it's assuming a certain level of evolution of humanity to be able to reach that. Because I agree with what Dana is saying, that even, three people can end up having conflict, living in a beautiful, natural, harmonious environment, etc. I also do agree, though, that if you're trying to impose something on people, that will lead to hypocrisy if they don't have the certain level of spiritual evolution there. So for me, that's one of the ways I am perceiving it.
Thank you.
Dana? To kind of follow up on that thought and yours too, maybe a word that we could use to describe the problem is ritualism. Ritualism. So, a lot of us, in my case, I grew up in the Catholic Church, and rituals are a big part of being a Catholic, and reciting various prayers and following various rituals. To a young boy that hasn't really been taught any of the inner meanings of them, they seem all empty. They're just kind of like going through the motions. And I think that's one of the things that the Tao wants to push back against.
Yeah.
When there's ritual that's devoid of meaning, then the value of the ritual is lost. In fact, the ritual is only useful if it elicits a sense of something sacred and internal. If it doesn't do that, then it's empty and without meaning whatsoever. And I think it's true. I think Confucius was a student of Lao-tzu, or at least a student of the Taoist teachings. And Confucianism really was the major religion that took over China, not Tao. In fact, I've been told, someone made the point that of all the major world religions, the one with the smallest following is the Tao.
Yes.
I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who says, I'm a Taoist.
Right. And I thought too, they talked at Taiwan. It's centered in Taiwan. And it does not sound like there's a large.
Not a lot of adherence to the Tao.
Yeah.
But there's a massive cultural history with Confucianism, and it's the, you might say, the end of the Confucian cycle, wherein things got highly ritualized to the point where it was ridiculous, and the meaning has basically was sucked out of this adherence, this blind adherence to ritual, which, by the way, is no different than in the Hindu history, and certainly can be. I mean, it's a problem with all the religions, ritualism.
Yes, yes.
So it sounds like you're seeing it then, Jerry, as, similar to the point where some sort of transformation had to come about, which we saw with Buddha, with Hinduism, and Jesus with Judaism. And you seem to be drawing an analogy of that with Tao and Confucianism.
Yeah, except that the Taoism was before Confucianism, so it wasn't really a reformation of Confucianism.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And Confucius did or may have been a student, because it talked about how he went and visited and spent time seeing, Lao-tzu and learning from him. So the next one, if someone would read, is chapter 51, Nourishing Virtue.
Okay, I'll read.
Thank you.
Tao produces all things. Te, virtue, rears them. Material elements shape them. Environmental forces perfect them. That is why of the 10,000 things, none does not honor Tao and exalt Te. Tao is honored and Te is exalted, not in obedience to anyone's command, but always in accord with innate freedom. Thus, while Tao produces things, Te rears them, brings them up, develops them, perfects them, matures them, feeds them, and shelters them. To produce, but not to claim ownership, to act, but not to presume on the result, to lead, but not to manipulate. This is called mystic virtue.
Sorry, I think I had a spelling error there. And I see here where, and he's getting.
Where did you get that? Sorry.
That's still in Henry Way translation. Was chapter 51. I assume they're all the same, so if Jerry said he was reading a chapter 14, the one we have, chapter 14, though some of them really sound different.
Yeah, they don't line up.
But
that's right. There are different translations of those verses by those numbers.
Right. But here, in virtue, and I think he talks a lot about how important it is not to be to be weak even, and to seem not to showcase and to be in the forefront, but to be in the background, and that's real strength. And so I see him alluding a little bit to that here. You produce, but you don't claim ownership, and that's how you can be one with the Tao. And so,
in this translation, it's doing without taking credit.
Yeah, exactly. Without taking credit. I mean, just humbleness and by having those traits, you can harmonize with Tao. If you don't, you fight it and you won't find it.
Dana, can I raise a question about your point there? Because I think when you mentioned the word humbleness, I think it just struck me that very much goes to the heart of the Tao. I mean, the virtue of humility, it weighs heavily in the Tao Te Ching. And I wanted to read this is 22, which I think is one of the most famous of all the verses in the Tao, and raise a question in relation to humbleness. Yield and remain whole.
Okay, yep.
Bend and remain straight. Be empty and remain full. Be worn and remain anew. Own little and be replete. Own much and be restless.
Yeah,
Therefore the sage embraces the one and sets an example for the whole world. He does not display himself, and so he shines. He does not defend himself, and so he is distinguished. He does not swagger, and so he never stumbles. He does not exult, and so he excels. He does not contend, and so the world cannot contend with him. The ancient adage, yield and remain whole, is not empty assertion. To be truly whole, no, be truly whole, and all things will come to you. So my question is, do you think that one of the main things that Lao-tzu is the approach of Lao-tzu in one of the central messages behind the Tao Te Ching, is he describing what you might call this a state of consciousness closer to selflessness, the whole concept of selflessness, which we hear about in so many different traditions, which is such a foreign and difficult concept in the Western world to grasp. But is the Tao, by and large, about the concept of selflessness?
I'll share that. For me, as you're talking, these qualities seem like a pretty high spiritual level. I mean, I would expect in any tradition spiritual tradition that I think is a major one, that at a high level, you're going to have humility and you're going to have selflessness.
Mm-hmm.
And so I almost want to, I don't know if it's a good correlation or not, but I almost want to put it at like Theosophy's Buddhic plane or above here. You know, they seem very high in what he's pointing to.
yes, yes.
Jerry, the word that comes to my mind, which is similar to selflessness, but is duty. Just feels like, you know, whatever they're involved in, they're approaching it as if it's their, you know, their total duty without, you know, like service without self.
Yeah.
Selfless service.
Or selfless service, yes. Yeah. Yeah, don't get attached to anything, just stay focused on what you're doing for the sake of doing it itself.
But a very strong selflessness is, and that is good. You know, and I think a lot of this is also, say, preached, but a lot of this is written for leaders of the country. I think that he saw, you know, they weren't, that they could rule using this selflessness, and they would be very strong. But the way they rule, and you know, the typical way they rule makes them very weak. So, so I don't know. Michelle, should we wrap up, or what do you want to?
Yeah, it is 8 o'clock or close to. So why don't you do what you're going to do to close it up?
Okay, I think obviously there's a number of other pair, but the very last one, which everybody who has a translation, it's all going to sound different. but very short, chapter 40, movement and function. Cyclic reversion is Tao's movement. Weakness is Tao's function. All things in the universe are derived from being. Being is derived from non-being. And that's the Tao.
I would like to read one,
Okay.
finally. This is 76. A man is born gentle and weak. At his death, he is hard and stiff. Green plants are tender and filled with sap. At their death, they are withered and dry. Therefore, the stiff and unbending is the disciple of death. The gentle and yielding is the disciple of life. Thus, an army without flexibility never wins a battle. A tree that is unbending is easily broken. The hard and strong will fall. The soft and weak will overcome. Thank you.
I read that one too. I like that one. That was, yeah.
Dana, can you unshare the document?
All right, so I just close it out.
You have to actually do unshare or
Stop
Oh,
sharing.
stop
stop
sharing.
sharing.
Yeah, okay.
Let me change the view here. Okay. So since this was mostly about the Tao Te Ching, we kind of just got to that first section of Robert's study guide. So I was just thinking that maybe next week we can just finish the study guide and look at the article by W.R. Old and finish it up with Theosophy and Taoism. How does that
Sounds
sound? Okay?
We
Except
can get
that
the
we-
articles.
We'll never get to Annie Besant.
Annie
doesn't-
Besant doesn't have a chapter on Taoism in her book.
Okay.
Oh,
No, doesn't have.
So I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's why Michelle was looking for other articles
Okay.
Okay.
because, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
So thank you, Dana. Thank you,
everybody.
everybody,
Thank you.
for
thank you, everyone.
yes.
Thank you, Dana. Thank
right.
you.
Blessings. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Stay healthy.
Good night.